In this first week, we will talk about culture and concepts related to culture, such as identity, ethnic groups, cultural diversity. So, before that, I would like to talk to you a little bit about teaching and learning. Teaching and learning is a dynamic process in which both the teacher and the students participate with the awareness that it starts from reflecting on knowledge acquired to attain a knowledge built and created personally and as a team. Structured thinking is that knowledge requires the mastery of technique, the art of the craft, the rigor and correct use of the instruments of a given discipline. But it can only be true knowledge when what has been transmitted to us is thought analytically and critically. Innovation is linked to the option of a path of questioning and originality, which does not neglect what has already been done, thought, written, but which seeks knowledge beyond mere transmission. Education, as Hans Robert Curtius taught in The Abandonment of Culture in 1931, an essay in which he analyzes the problem of education and the role of both educational institutions and cultural institutions, is different from formation. While education is limited to the transmission of the essential to a selected bookish knowledge, perpetuated in time, privileging form and sacrificing substance, formation corresponds to investment in man, offering him intellectual discipline, accustoming him to rigor thinking, allowing him to reflect on the cultural, philosophical, and historical traditions of which he is the faithful depository. To form for Ernest Robert Curtius should also be an investment in personality, in his understanding of culture and thought as dynamic traditions, in the capacity for reflection, in our I and the ethical us. It seemed to Curtius, however, that culture had been forgotten in favor of a present that was lived too quickly, eventually leading to man's isolation and social weakness, an imbarbarization process, as he called it. In European literature and the Latin Middle Ages, written in 1948, he exemplifies exactly how knowledge should be understood, drawing attention to the study of thought and history that provides, quoting, a widening and a clarification of consciousness. The drift of ideas, as defends the Italian philosopher Amadeo Anelli, of a nihilistic and neo-idealist nature, which followed the fall in love with the sciences and their methods judged capable of providing objective interpretative schemes and frameworks for the humanities and literature, and the confused perception of relations of some fundamental concepts, such as true and truth, society and collectivity, subject and object, have led to positions that seem to confuse the fragmentary with the fragment, emptying the function of criticism, relegating issues of ethics and their nexus with culture to the background, confusing tradition with history, history with historiography, such as Daniela Marcheschi and other Italian critics pointed out in her book Sogno della Letteratura. And most of the times, identities are confused, and our criticism of literary works suffer from these pathologies. So, what she does is to invite the scholars to adopt a concept that is not archaeological but dialogical of the multiplicity of traditions and cultures, identifying, for example, dominants, subdominants, fields, receptions of traditions, dialogisms and polyphonies, conception of identity and identification, ways of seeking authenticity and of truth, overcoming, as understood by Mikhail Bakhtin, the linear temporality towards the time lived, keeping in mind that the being and the real are always changing. It is also necessary to consider the importance of clarification and the clarity of ideas. In a world where, as Umberto Eco wrote, one lives under the uncertainty of the meaning of the verse pronounced by Pluto in Dante's Inferno, Pape Satan, Alepe, probably an evocation to Satan. When ideas get confused, the world is open to the diabolical. Starting from the concepts of state of crisis and liquid society of Zygmunt Bauman, the Italian scholar links the crisis of the concept of community and individualism without limits. The vision of the road partner as an enemy or an antagonist, of which we have to be suspicious and cautious, subjectivism, the loss of confidence in the right, and the proliferation of extremist ideologies, with an internal impulse to destroy and start, making each departure part of a continuous process of precariousness, a kind of journey in various rental vehicles, with the crisis of thought itself. In the postmodern world, from the crisis of great narrations in favor of fragmented, playful, or ironic revisits of the past, of a temporary and disbelieving character, the thinker and scholar must maintain a principle of youth, optimistic, critical, precise, innovative, creative, linked to the real, conscious environment, capable of problematizing with the instruments of the ancient and modern, concerned with the breadth and aesthetic and ethical dimension of its work. So, in this course that involves culture, literature, and of course, you yourselves as students, issues from the anthropological, cultural, and artistic field, it is necessary that the vision of man and culture be more sum than exclusion, awareness of time and space. It must also be generous, broad, differentiated, open to the pleasure of relationships and connections, considering that there are no isolated knowledges, as there are no unique traditions or cultural monads. The world is polyhedral, and so also knowledge is polyhedral. Thus, as stated, one cannot fail to consider permanence and becoming in the cultural experience of man, as Marqueschi says, both with regard to genetic traits or natural dispositions and in relation to the stratified acquisitions of different knowledge. This happens under the aegis of coexistence and reciprocal tension, not in the succession of a before and another, and vice versa. Basically, the proposal is to question and think about the present, past, and man and his productions as belonging to a whole, and also of people belonging to a whole, cultures and traditions.